Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. This is the weekend edition, and we're coming to you live on location in Paris, France. Standing here in front of Notre Dame de Paris, which literally translated means Our Lady of Paris. Notre Dame Cathedral is a landmark regularly visited by about 12 million people a year, more than any other landmark in Paris. By comparison, a Sistine Chapel in the Vatican only gets a mere 6 million visitors a year. In April of this year, a fire started at the end of the workday where restorations were underway in the top of the cathedral. The fire burned for 15 hours, and much of the wooden roof structure was destroyed. The roof beams were made of wood, and the roof was covered with tin. The basilica has a long and storied history. Construction was started in the year 1163, and it took an entire century to complete, although the work continued for another 80 years beyond the initial completion. Notre Dame suffered desecration during the French Revolution, and much of its religious imagery was either damaged, stolen, or destroyed. In the 19th century, the cathedral was the site of the coronation of Napoleon I, and funerals of many presidents of the Republic ever since. The two bell towers have 10 bells, and from up inside the bell tower you have an incredible view over the rooftops of much of Paris. I've walked up the North Tower several years ago when it was open to the public to walk on the roof and to see the view of the city. The ornate gargoyles and statues that decorate the cathedral are largely intact. Items made of wood were destroyed, but items made of limestone largely survived the fire pretty well. Even the copper rooster weather vane on top of the spire, which fell to the ground, was found intact in the rubble of the fire. The spire itself, of course, was completely destroyed. The spire is actually the second spire on the cathedral. The first one was built in and around the year 1225, but after 5 centuries of taking a beating from the weather, it was starting to collapse and was removed in 1786 and replaced with a more modern version made of oak covered with lead. The spire weighed 750 tons. I'm not sure who did the structural engineering for the spire back in the day without the benefit of structural engineering software, probably not even a slide rule, but it's pretty impressive. I say this as an engineer who spent a lot of hours buried deep in structural calculations when I was in university. The two towers are 69 meters high, that's 226 feet. They were the tallest structures in Paris until the completion of the Eiffel Tower in 1889. The towers were the last major part of the cathedral to be built between 1220 and 1240, and the North Tower between 1235 and 1250. The North Tower is a little bit bigger, and you can see that when you're standing directly in front of the church. Following the April fire, there were a whole pile of proposals on modernizing the cathedral's design. But just a couple of weeks ago, on July the 16th, the French Parliament passed a law requiring that the cathedral be rebuilt exactly as it appeared before the fire. Right now, standing here in front of the cathedral, there are several rings of fencing surrounding it. Several tents have been erected inside the construction zone to house equipment, and there's some hydraulic cranes on site as well. There's no sign of burnt debris any longer, and as you can imagine, the painstaking task of sifting through the debris for any artifacts that would be salvageable would have taken several months. The cathedral's famous rose windows do not have any of the original glass. Some were destroyed by the settling of the building, which caused them to shatter. Others were smashed during the French Revolution. Paris is a very old city. It's got narrow streets throughout. Napoleon had a different vision, and he expropriated a wide swath through the center of the city in order to create the wide, expansive boulevards like the Champs-Élysées and the Arc de Triomphe that we see today. These wide open spaces are the result of Napoleon's vision to create a grand European capital. Paris, in the middle of August, is teeming with tourists, and Parisians who are on vacation typically leave the city in August. If you haven't visited Paris, you haven't seen the historic sites, it's definitely worth the visit. Museums like the Louvre house some of the most amazing of the world's artifacts, whether it's from ancient Egypt, some of the most important painters of the Renaissance period, and if your desire is to see Impressionist art, you can skip the Louvre altogether and go to the Musée d'Orsay. The Musée d'Orsay is on the south bank of the Seine River, and it used to be an old train station. It's been remodeled completely as a museum, and all of the major Impressionist painters, whether it's Renoir, Monet, all of the major Impressionist painters have all the most important works of art in the Musée d'Orsay. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your weekend. If you haven't had a chance to visit Paris, definitely I recommend it. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.